Welcome everyone to our webinar. Today we're going to be focusing on a product demo that shows you how you can gain visibility to make better decisions and move your company forward. So my name is Caroline Holitsky and I'm the marketing director here at Meisterplan USA. As of November 1st, I will have been at Meisterplan for 5 years, and I am currently located at our Houston, Texas office. And my professional experience is primarily from the financial services and oil and gas industries, but I love working with people from all industries to figure out ways to help them be more successful and accelerate growth, especially in these uncertain times that we've been experiencing. So I'm really excited to be part of the webinar today. Along with me is my colleague, Brian Hentz. He's the general manager at Meisterplan USA. Brian, would you like to give a little introduction about yourself, please? Oh, let's see. Can't hear you yet.
Excellent. Thanks, Caroline. Sorry for the glitch there. So yeah, great to see everybody. My name is Brian Hintz. So I manage Meisterplan's business in the Americas and the Asia Pacific regions. And my background is mostly focused on helping companies scale through technology. And that's exactly what we're doing here at Meisterplan.
Great. Thanks, Brian. So for all of you attending, if you have any questions, please submit those in the questions panel. We will have a question and answer session toward the end. And if there are any questions that we're not able to get to, we're going to answer any questions on our blog as well as contact you afterwards to make sure your questions were answered. So let's get started. So Brian, you were part of our last webinar along with Laura Bernard from PMO Strategies, where you guys discussed how PMOs and business leaders can ensure resiliency. Do you mind recapping for us how companies can really focus on building business agility and being adaptable and resilient?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Caroline. So as you said, we've had some recent discussions kind of focusing on the higher level topics around how to make organizations more agile and more adaptable to change. And so today's conversation is meant to be to provide some more concrete examples of how companies can use Meisterplan to do that. So the bulk of today's presentation is going to focus on the product and how we can use Meisterplan to help organizations adapt and grow. I encourage everyone to go back and look at the previous presentations because they have some really good context for that kind of higher level discussion. But just to set the stage today, I'm gonna quickly go over a couple of the key points because I think they're relevant. So, often what we find is that processes and tools are built and designed with the assumption that everything in life is linear, right? And in the context of decision making in a company, you find that the assumption is corporate strategy gets set in stone and it's unchangeable. And then as part of an annual planning cycle, new initiatives get brought forward maybe once a year. Management makes decisions on which projects they're going to fund, and then magically all of those projects get delivered on time and under budget. And that's kind of how processes and tools assume that the world works. And we know that's not realistic, right? We know that that's not actually how things are delivered, and we know that also doesn't give us the flexibility to adapt to what's happening around us and external forces that are out of our control. And so, what we've tried to think about is, what's a better way to approach that to represent the reality that we actually live in. And so we think of decision making as more of an iterative process. And we've identified 3 critical competencies that help businesses become more agile. And what we found is that these competencies really set apart high-performing organizations and PMOs, and we've got a playbook to help operationalize them so that they can become more adaptable and more resilient. So really quickly, before we get into your product demonstration to highlight how we can operationalize them, I'll just quickly go through what we call the 3 A's of business agility. So first, we talk about anticipation. And this isn't really about predicting the future, because if we had a product that could do that, I think we'd be in a different business probably. But it's more about helping people anticipate and consider potential future outcomes based on possible changes, right? And those changes could be market changes, they could be global forces, they could be micro changes in your business, changes in your product, whatever the case may be, changes in buying behavior. But we all know kind of where the risks are within our business. And, gosh, if that thing were different, then we'd be, we'd really have to shift gears and change course. And so what we find is that being able to ask and answer the question, what if, really puts companies in the driver's seat when it comes to managing their future. And so anticipation is really critical. And then next, tying into it closely, is we think about adaptability. And we all know that being able to quickly make data-driven decisions is critical. But often what we find is that PMOs and companies are paralyzed when it comes to making decisions, especially when it comes to change decisions, because they haven't even considered the other possibilities before they encounter these new realities. And so every decision feels like it's a massive shift for the business. And simultaneously, what we see is that organizations that have taken the time to really anticipate what some of those future possibilities might be, they're able to really quickly adapt their business. And anytime they encounter change, it doesn't feel like some massive shift for the business. It feels like something they've considered, and therefore it's a logical step for them to make changes to the organization. And then finally, what we find is that organizations that are able to anticipate and adapt well are then able to empower their teams to really accelerate their delivery towards a more clear and more focused set of goals. And I think an important part of this approach is that it's not prescriptive on how teams need to execute. So what that allows us to do is get alignment across teams, regardless of any specific methodology for delivering work. And I think that can create a superpower for helping companies really consider the future, adapt their business when appropriate, and then empower their teams to grow the business, even in times of dramatic change. And so with those competencies in mind, Caroline's going to show us some best practices with Meisterplan for how to implement these competencies in your company.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So now that we know a little bit more about how successful companies can really work to achieve business agility and resilience, I'll go ahead and jump into the product demo. And what I will do at first is, oops, got to log back into Meisterplan first. And then I will show you, I'll start off with showing you the main features in Meisterplan. And then after I've gone through some of the main features, we'll go a little bit more in depth and talk about ways that you can practically use Meisterplan to achieve those 3 A's that Brian was talking about. So first, this is the main view in Meisterplan, and we call it the Portfolio Designer. And what you'll see here on the left side is your list of projects, and they are in order of priority. And then on the right side here, you have a Gantt chart. And with the Gantt chart, you can see the timelines of the projects. You can also see the milestones and dependencies. So for instance, for this internal reorganization project here, we can see that it is dependent on the first phase of the rollout SAP project to be completed. So then you'll also notice that there's a couple of lines across the page. So we have this vertical red line, and that indicates today's date. And then we have this green must-have line and this red cutoff line. And as the name implies, the must-have line, the projects above that are your absolute must-have projects. So a lot of times those are your regulatory projects, things you have to do because of compliance. It may be a customer project that you're committed to and is an absolute high priority project as well. Below the cutoff line, those are the projects that are not currently taken into consideration in your portfolio plan. So those may be projects that are on hold. They may be projects that are in your backlog. And sometimes people use this section for new initiatives that have not yet been approved. So then if we go down a little bit below, we see our resource section. And the current view is showing the resources by role. And you can also drill down and you can see actual individuals as well and see who's assigned to what projects. But if we come here and we look at the junior consultant role, what you'll see in this view here are all of the projects that include a junior consultant. So this view is kind of like a reverse image from the project list above. So whereas we have the highest priority here is the Acme project, that correlates with the highest priority, which is at the bottom, the resource histogram. So this too is the Acme project. So what we can see is as we move up to the different projects and as we get to the lower priorities, we see they've turned red, and that corresponds with red lines in the projects in the Gantt chart. So what that tells us is that we don't have enough junior consultants to be able to complete the work as we currently have planned. So we just don't have enough capacity in that time frame as we've planned it. And a little bit later, we'll talk about what we can do with that information and ways that we can resolve that. But for now, I'll just go on and show you some more features in Meisterplan. So the next section is the financial section, and you can use this to track portfolio budgets and revenue goals. Okay, so then if you're probably wondering, okay, well, how do I get my data into Meisterplan? So there's the cool thing, one of the cool things about Meisterplan is that you don't have to bring in a huge amount of data to be able to effectively plan. So there are multiple ways that you can bring in just the most important data that you need to do your plans. So I'll show you a few of those. So we have a copy and paste import of projects. So you can just take a spreadsheet and copy and paste the data into Meisterplan directly. So it's super easy way. We also have integrations with tools like Jira, Smartsheet, Excel, Clarity PPM. And we also have a Zapier integration as well as a REST API. So it doesn't matter that much where you have your information. And even if we don't have a specific connector with the REST API and the Zapier integration, you can get the data that you need into the tool. So once you have that data into the tool, let's talk about ways that you can visualize and analyze that data. So we've already talked about the portfolio designer, which of course gives a ton of great information, but let's look at some of the other views in Meisterplan. So the first one is the project list. And as you can see, this is, as the name implies, a list of your projects, and you can sort these based on project fields in different ways. It's currently sorted by status, and what this can tell you at just a bird's eye view is really quickly you can find out what projects need immediate attention. So what's critical, what needs immediate attention. Then the next view that we'll look at is the goals. And here you can add your business goals, and you can also very easily drag and drop projects so that you can say which projects are aligned with each goals, and then there's some KPIs that help you distinguish how you're accomplishing those goals. Then the next view is the roadmap, and there's different ways that you can group the roadmap, but as you know, so it is a roadmap of your projects, and as you can see, it's a long-term view of your plan. And currently we have it grouped by business goal. So this gives another view into whether or not your work is aligned to strategy. So this can tell you how many projects are aligned with each goal, and you can also drill down and see the specific projects and their timing. So it's a really quick way to ensure that your work is aligned with your corporate strategy. There are other ways to group in the roadmap. So some of the other options, you could group by stage gate or risk level, or potentially by payback period. So you could find out which projects will give us our quickest ROI. Okay, now if we go back to the main portfolio designer, you'll notice here at the top, it says plan of record. So what that means is what we're looking at right now is our current plan. It's the plan that's been approved by leadership, and it's what you use to communicate to your organization about what work is being done and what the priorities are. Okay, so those are basically some of the main features in Meisterplan. But now we're going to take a look at the 3 A's that Brian mentioned earlier. So the first one is anticipating change. So let's talk about ways we can use Meisterplan, the tool, to accomplish these 3 A's. So When it comes to anticipating change, we talked about already how to get data into Meisterplan and all of the multiple options. So whether you're connecting from specific tools like Jira or Smartsheet, these different options and these easy ways to get the data into the tool gives you that transparency into what the current status of work is. And that allows you to see what's going on today and helps you anticipate the needs for the future. What it also does is it allows your teams to continue working with the work management, project management, collaboration tools that work best for them, and the methods, maybe it's Scrum or different methods that really work for them. So you don't have to interrupt the way that your project teams are working, and you still get that transparency into the data. The next thing going along with that is here in the plan of record in the portfolio designer, you can see, okay, this is what our current standing looks like, and here's what the future looks like. And you can anticipate the needs that you'll have in the future based on the current plan. And also, as new initiatives come in, if you see that there's a lot of problems in certain quarters potentially, and you may know, okay, well, that may not be a time to schedule a new initiative, or it will help you figure out and anticipate what you will need to do in order to make sure that you can accomplish those new initiatives. So, and that's oftentimes before the initiatives are even approved. So these are just some ways that Meisterplan can help you anticipate change. So now let's move on to talking about adapting plans. And this is an area where Meisterplan has a lot of options to help. So this whole time we've been talking about, or we've been looking at everything in the plan of record, but there are other ways to use Meisterplan. A key feature of Meisterplan is its scenario or what if planning. So what you can do is you can go in and you can add a scenario that is a copy of the plan of record, and you can use that to do some what if planning. We've already got one of those scenarios pre-built, so I'll open that up and just show you some of the things you can do when you're doing scenario planning. So let's say that you're committed to the projects in your current plan, but you need to figure out what you can do to achieve those. So you might take a look at, okay, for a future project, if there's an issue, can I just move that project to a later time frame and free up the problems? Or for a project that's currently happening, you may go to a milestone and you may split the project at a specific milestone and then see if it makes sense to do the second portion of that project at a later point. So those are a couple of possibilities. You can also take a look at your resources. So if we're looking at the mobile cells, we can look at where we see issues, and we see issues with the senior developers. So we can go in and we see that Tim is really over allocated during that project time frame. So what you can do with that information is you can, sorry, let me go back to that where I was, and you can take a look at Tim, and you can see what his role is, and you can see what skills he has. And then if you go to the project, you can potentially find someone who is part of has the same role as Tim and similar skills, and you can replace find a new resource to replace Tim for that portion of the project, and that way it can continue as you have planned. Another option is potentially, if you don't have a specific person in mind, you may unstaff that to the role. So you may say, okay, at a later point, I'll have to make sure that I find someone with the same skill set and the same role to fill in that position. So then some other options are, if you're really needing to adapt plans, there may be some disruptions that happen. So it might be that a regulatory project comes on the horizon, or something that you expected at a later point. So you may have to take a project and move it up in the priority list because it has become a must-have and the timing of the project has changed. So what you can do at that point as those disruptions arise, you can then see, okay, if we've had to move this project up and change the timing, how does that affect all the other projects in our portfolio? And then you can kind of try to find ways to solve that and make sure that you're able to accomplish all the work that you can do, especially the must-have projects. So that's one thing. And then there may be the case that that you have a major disruption, like what we saw this year in 2020. So at that point, you may be looking at we only can do our must-have projects. So you can drag the cutoff line up and you can take a look just specifically at your must-have projects and try to figure out what capacity do you need to at least accomplish those. And then as situations change and get better, then you can pull back in your other projects. So these are some different ways that, that you can do some scenario planning. There's other options. So you've seen me already where I've moved some projects up and down and that changes their priority. So there is the possibility to do drag and drop prioritization in Meisterplan. But another thing that is possible is if we hover over the SAP project here, we can see that there's some scoring criteria that's included in this project. So we see strategy fit, payback period, risk level, and that criteria together makes up a project score. So for the rollout, we see that the rollout of the SAP, we see that that project score is 37. Now, if we go down and we compare that to the mobile cells project, we see based on that same criteria, it has a project score of 90. So an option that you can do at that point is you can then sort by project score, which will move that project up in the rank based on its project score. And so then it gives it higher priority. So if you really want to make sure that you're prioritizing your projects, not just based on what certain departments think are the most important projects or by gut feelings, you can set up this criteria and really make sure that you have things prioritized according to your corporate strategy. So all of these things in the scenario planning, what that can help you do is it helps you create these different scenarios. And let's say that the future is somewhat uncertain and we don't know what the economy, if it's going to improve greatly in the next 6 months or if it's going to get worse. So another option that you can use scenarios for are to make plan alternatives. And so you can say, okay, well, what will we do if such and such happens? Plan A happens. What will we do if plan B happens? So you can have that ready to go. And then this can be presented to leadership, and giving this information to leadership and already having some of these proposals ready really gives them the quality information so that they can make the best decisions for the company. And then once a scenario is approved, then you can go in and you can make that scenario the new plan of records. That can be your scenario, your plan going forward. So yeah, those are some of the ways that Meisterplan can help you adapt plans. So the last category that we talked about is accelerate execution. And I will start off by saying that Meisterplan isn't built as a tool for execution, but it does have features built in that help your teams be able to execute. So for instance, we've already talked about how you can have visibility into the resource availability and capacity of your employees, as well as what skills they have. So that information can help you build optimal teams. And you can make sure that those teams have the capacity in the time frame that their projects are planned so they can get the work done. Another thing that Meisterplan can help with when it comes to accelerating execution is resource conflict resolution. So when we see that in the future there are projects that are going to have an issue, you can resolve those before those projects even start. So that way once you have those resolutions, the project teams can really focus on getting the work done and executing quickly and delivering more results. So basically, you can get out of the way of your teams so that they can execute the best that they can. So that is basically our, that is basically our product demo today. So I want to thank everyone that is here, and we are going to start our question and answer session now. But if anybody has to go early, I wanted to let you know that you can get more information on our website. So you can go to meisterplan.com/trial and start your free trial, and you can play around with it yourself and find out ways that you think that Meisterplan can help you make better decisions. You can also schedule a free one-on-one demo with one of our experts, and they can take you through Meisterplan and customize the demo for your organization and answer any specific questions that you have on how you can make Meisterplan work for you. And you can find that again on our website at meisterplan.com/requestedDemo. Okay, so Brian, I'll hand it over to you for the question and answer session.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Caroline. That was really helpful. And again, I think compared to our last discussion, a good, more concrete example of how you can implement some of these competencies. So, we've got a number of good questions. I don't know that we'll get to them all, but I'll grab a couple here kind of as they're coming in. So one of the questions is someone talking about how they have teams that work agile and some of their planning is using a more traditional waterfall method, and can Meisterplan support that? And I kind of touched on that a little bit, but it's one of the areas that I think really sets Meisterplan apart and can really provide a lot of value for organizations, in that you can combine teams and projects kind of regardless of how they're being executed. And so, in a lot of cases, agile teams are really good at delivering results, but they struggle with understanding kind of the bigger picture. Like, what if I need help on this other project and it's someone who's working on an agile team? How do I know what implication that has for the stuff they're working on today? And that's one of the nice things about Meisterplan, is you can plan for both, all kinds of work. And, we've seen hybrid models and things like that. And, our Jira integration is a great example where you can really bring visibility from that product into Meisterplan and show how something in an agile context translates to a more traditional planning view like Meisterplan. And you can build plans around that without having to actually change the way that people are executing on their work. And so your agile team still gets to be agile. Nobody messes with, with their sacred tools. And at the same time, the executive team gets to understand how they can plan the most and best work for their teams based on who's actually available. So it's a good question, and one we hear often, and obviously it's it's a popular topic these days. So it's definitely relevant. A couple other questions that are related about sort of other products that we integrate with, right? So one of the things you talked about, Caroline, is how do I get my information into Meisterplan, right? And as you mentioned, we're not really focused on helping people execute work, right? We're more thinking about future planning, and there are a fantastic, cornucopia of tools available that help people manage the execution of work. And so, how do we connect those dots? And we have some native integrations built into products like I mentioned, Jira, Smartsheet, ServiceNow, CA Clarity, and then we've got an API that helps us connect to essentially any other SaaS product or on-premise product. We have an integration with a tool called Zapier, which is a really cool workflow engine that essentially connects just about any SaaS tool to Meisterplan. And so we've got a lot of really cool ways that our customers are using to kind of automate the input of data and ensure that what's reality in their system of execution is represented in Meisterplan, so they're making decisions with the best and most accurate information. And sometimes what we find, just as an aside, is a lot of companies tell us, those tools are good up to a point, but often they're actually not the sort of source of truth, if you will, right? And so sometimes what we find is that actually managing some of that data in Meisterplan can help surface what's true and what's not true. And by having the visuals that we have within our product, it can be a really nice way to just kind of gut check what's in your system of execution. So that's a question we hear a lot too. Let's see, we got time for maybe a couple more. So someone asked about if we support single sign-on. So absolutely, the most common methods are using some technology called SAML, but a lot of our large enterprise customers already have an identity provider like Ping or Okta or Azure Active Directory, and we can connect to those to ensure that users are able to seamlessly log into their corporate system. And so you think of those types of features that are common in enterprise SaaS software, and you're most likely to find those in Meisterplan too. Another question about, so can I restrict access for my stakeholders, like for example, project managers? And it's a good question, right? And I think a lot of times what we find is that the data that's in Meisterplan really becomes critical to decision making, and so you need to ensure that it's accurate. And part of accuracy is ensuring that it's not accidentally changed, right? Or I guess purposefully changed by the wrong people. And so there's that aspect of it. And then also we talk to a lot of companies where they have parts of the organization working on maybe considering new acquisitions, for example, but they're things that they don't want more broadly broadcast to the rest of the team. And so through permissions and user groups within Meisterplan, you can ensure that people can only see the data that you want them to see, and that people can only manipulate the data that you want them to manipulate. And at the same time, it's really nice because you can create, reports, for example, that are great for an executive, and they can log in and see exactly the data they want without having to try and navigate through the rest of the product to try and figure out where that data sits. So, highly configurable from that point of view. And then maybe time for one more here. You kind of touched on this, so just to dovetail with that. So, someone says, I've got Power BI, can I connect that to Meisterplan? And that's an area where we also see a lot of success with our customers is connecting data from Meisterplan with data from other systems to build an even bigger picture to help you with your planning in Meisterplan. And so we've got an API that connects to just about any third-party reporting system. Power BI is very popular, Tableau is very popular, ClickView. And we find that some of the images that those products build can help, again, sort of gain some additional insights from data that are from other systems in a business. And so, absolutely, that's part of the standard product. And so I think the rest of these questions, I think maybe just in the interest of time, maybe we can follow up separately afterwards. Yeah, that's it from the questions for this point.
Great, thank you so much, Brian. And thank you everyone for attending. We will have a follow-up email that we'll send out to you, and with the availability of the recording of this for you to watch again later. And if you have any questions for us, please feel free to reach out to us. You can contact us at sales@meisterplan.com, and please visit our website. We have tons of great information there as well. So thank you all so much for being here. Bye-bye.